17th century, John Locke became the founder of a new philosophy called Liberalism that began in England. Locke was born in 1632 in England. His father was a country lawyer and a military man who was a captain during the Civil War. Both of his parents were Puritans, and therefore he was a Puritan at the early stages of his life. Locke went to the highly prestigious University of Oxford and studied medicine. After graduating in 1656, he returned to the school 2 years later for a Master of Arts. Then, many years after this, he graduated with a bachelor's degree of medicine from the university. In 1683, Locke was forced to leave England due to a failed assassination attempt of King Charles II and his brother James. While he was exiled from England, he wrote an essay concerning human understanding, which examined the nature of human knowledge. This essay will later help form his philosophy of liberalism. Locke returned to England in 1688 after King James II fled the country, which allowed for the making of an English Parliament. John Locke based his ideas of liberalism off the foundations of natural law and natural right. He argued that each man has a natural right to life, liberty, and property. Many interpretations of natural law existed before Locke's time, including ideas from Cicero, Thomas Aquinas, and Hugo Grotius, all of whom probably had an influence on John Locke's ideas. Locke speaks of a nature where men are free, equal, and independent. For example, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. Not only did Locke believe in natural law, he also believed in natural rights. The three natural rights are life, liberty, and property. And he claims that individuals have a duty to respect the rights of others, even in the state of nature. John Locke's three major pieces of writing were a letter concerning toleration, two treatises of government, and an essay concerning human understanding. A letter concerning toleration was written when John Locke feared Catholicism was going to take over England, and in this letter he responds to the problem of religion and government with the idea of religious toleration. This letter was written to his close friend Philip van Limburg. This was Locke's major piece of writing that sparked his philosophy on liberalism. In the first treatise, he argues the divine right of kings and explains his belief on how every man has the ability to govern himself. The second treatise was the most influential piece, where he proposed a solution to the political upheaval in England at the time. It ultimately laid the foundation for modern forms of democracy and for the Constitution of the United States. Finally, Locke's third major piece of writing was an essay concerning human understanding. This was written while Locke was in Holland after being exiled from England for a couple of years. This essay is written about a person's mind and thought, and it talks about how people express themselves through language, logic, and religious practices. Aristotle was one philosopher that had a big impact on John Locke. Aristotle wrote about the concept of a blank slate. Thousands of years later, in Locke's essay concerning human understanding, he used the phrase white paper. The terms blank slate and white paper both refer to the state of a man's mind at birth. Some of the greatest controversy with John Locke is whether or not his views are based off Thomas Hobbes' ideas. Hobbes believed that a central authority would allow men and women to live and function in society. This idea influenced Locke's two treatises of government. However, he took a different side. Hobbes and Locke agreed that individuals have a right to property in the state of nature, but Hobbes denies that individuals have any duty to respect the property of others. René Descartes was a philosopher during the 16th century that influenced John Locke's philosophy of liberalism. Locke even declared that he would rather learn Descartes than Aristotle. Locke and Descartes had very different ideas, but his influence on Locke is seen when Locke explores the origins of knowledge and logic in his essay concerning human understanding. Before I go on to fully explain John Locke's philosophy of liberalism, I'd like to define what a liberal is today. one who favors greater freedom in political or religious matters. John Locke's philosophy of liberalism rejected the notions of hereditary privilege, state religion, absolute monarchy, and the divine right of kings. He also defended the claim that men are naturally free and equal against claims that God made all people naturally subject to a monarch. John Locke defended the principle of majority rule and the separation of legislative and executive powers. Therefore, he believes that the people should gain more power. The American Constitution and all Western political systems are based off the philosophy of individual rights and limited government, just like the philosophy of liberalism. John Locke may have influenced well-known 18th century figures such as Laurence Sterne, Thomas Jefferson, and Voltaire, and is sometimes known as the most influential philosopher of modern times. Locke had a very big influence on the Age of Enlightenment and the revival of education. In education, he influenced the connection of words and ideas. Peter Gay said that John Locke was the founder of Enlightenment in education as in much else. In the late 18th and 19th centuries, Locke's views were largely rejected. The philosophy of utilitarianism took over Locke's ideas of natural rights. Locke's philosophy and ideas were revived in the 19th century. Oftentimes, but not all the time, liberals go along with the Democratic Party and conservatives go along with the Republican Party. Liberalism supports the ideas of free and fair elections, civil rights, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, free trade, and private property. Conservatives believe in personal responsibility, limited government, free markets, and a strong national defense. Today we see John Locke's philosophy of liberalism play a huge role in the government of our country. Liberals tend to side with the democratic beliefs of protecting the rights and freedoms of the people. Locke's arguments of natural laws and the natural rights to life, liberty, and property are still seen today. Locke believed that natural law and natural rights coexist, but natural law is primary, commanding respect for the rights of others. Just like the controversy between liberalism and utilitarianism in the 17th century, we have controversy between the Democratic and Republican parties. The Republican Party believes in a strict federal government, whereas the Democratic Party believes in power to the people, just like John Locke's philosophy of liberalism. Today, the people of America realize just how influential John Locke was to the development of our government. It's amazing how a philosophy that began in the 17th century is still alive today, after being criticized so heavily during the 18th and 19th centuries. The philosophy of liberalism and the notions that each man has a natural right to life, liberty, and property will have a huge impact on the history of America.